I used to laugh at the dust devils that crossed my grandmother's yard, until one hopped on a single leg and stole the flame right out of our kitchen. You can call this a prank if you need to sleep tonight. I can't. If you love true folklore horror told like real experiences, subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Tonight I'll tell you what a one-legged trickster can do when you forget the rules of a rural night in Brazil. You'll hear knots that tie themselves, a whistle that answers from inside a sieve, and why you should never, ever, whistle after dark on a farm road. I'll also tell you how to bargain when mischief becomes a storm you can't outrun. They call him Saci. Not a ghost and not a devil, something trickier, a forest kid who never grew up and never needed to. He wears a red cap that makes the world easier to bend and smokes a tiny pipe that smells like burnt sugar cane. He rides whirlwinds, braids horse manes, sours milk, hides tools, and laughs when doors lock themselves on the wrong side. The old people don't tell you myths. They tell you rules. Don't whistle after dark, keep a sieve by the door so he stops to count the holes. If he comes in a dust devil, throw a rosary across his path, never insult him, and never steal his cap unless you're ready to carry the debt of a wish. If Saci is in a place, the place feels almost right, almost. Milk clots too soon. A latch clicks by itself. The horses won't look you in the eye. When it's like that, you don't challenge, you bargain. You leave tobacco by the door. You close the gate twice. You lay a sieve on the floor at night so any visitor with a trickster's soul loses track of time counting circles. And if you must, you trap the whirlwind in a bottle with a cross scratched in the glass and a cork that wants to stay put. I knew all this. I just forgot one rule: don't laugh at what you're about to ask for mercy from. I went back to the farm after my grandmother broke her hip. Her friend Dona Lourdes cooked for us while I fixed things that had decided to die all at once. The pump moaned, the henhouse latch sulked, and the radio chewed its own wire. Everything I touched felt like it had been touched first by small mischievous fingers that left no prints and every consequence. The first night, I found 3 tight braids in our mare's mane. My grandmother, who never wasted words, looked at the horse, then at me, and said, "If you laugh, sleep with a sieve." I laughed anyway. The braids were so neat I wanted to applaud. We ate early. The sky over the cane fields bruised purple. I washed dishes while a whistle slid across the yard, a single note like a boy trying not to smile while he hides behind your shoulder. I whistled back without thinking. I set the plate down too fast and it rang like a small bell. Dona Lourdes said my name softly, not like a warning exactly, more like a, "You know better," and put a sieve on the floor by the back door. "Daixa," she said, "leave it." We left it. The kitchen went quiet in that way. That means it's listening. Later, the wind rolled a little dust devil across the yard. The dogs, who bark at everything including moths and their own terrible thoughts, didn't bark. The dust devil paused by the steps and leaned like a person leans on a door frame with one shoulder. It watched us the way weather doesn't watch. Then it hopped, one hop, and slid away. I told myself that was nothing. It wasn't. That night, the kitchen flame shrank twice and grew twice without the wood changing. A key we keep on a nail fell, but only after turning itself vertical and quivering like a leaf trying not to fall. When I reached for it, a cold draft licked my fingers as if something small had run past my hand. I checked the windows. Closed. I checked the latch. Set. I checked the sieve. It sat there like furniture, harmless. Then a tiny sound came from it the way sound comes from a seashell, an almost voice counting under its breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not numbers, exactly, beats. I could feel my mouth filling with the taste of iron. When I bent near, a laugh breathed up through the sieve holes, thin as smoke. No shape and 1,000 shapes, a face drawn by someone who refused to commit to lines. I put the sieve on a chair because the floor felt rude. The laugh stopped, then came from the chair itself, as if I had made the mistake a child wants you to make: the more you elevate the trick, the higher it climbs. The next morning, the yard looked ordinary in that heavy way when ordinary is absolutely on purpose. A ladle hung backwards. Our salt jar had a new lid. There were footprints on the porch, not shoe prints, not barefoot either. They looked like a person had refused balance and still moved forward, smudges as if the ground had been nudged by a single sure toe and nothing else. I untied the mare's braids. She leaned her neck into my hands and shivered like a person with a fever. When she shook herself free, I found a red thread woven into one braid. No spool, no origin, just a single red line that became smaller as I pulled until it vanished somewhere inside the hair as if it had never been separate from it. I kept the thread in my pocket. That was my second mistake. At lunch, the pipe smell came from nowhere. Burnt sugar, warm and sly, like a church candle that didn't agree with its sermon. I found the kitchen flame missing, not out, but missing. The space above the wood was dry air. The flame had gone somewhere else with our heat. "Give it back," I said, "because you talk to a house that's being borrowed by a guest with bad manners." The air trembled. The flame stepped down from a shelf where an oil lamp lives and perched on the wood again like a small bird that had been coaxed back to your finger. I put the sieve back by the door. We set a little tobacco by it with a match laid on top like a promise we wouldn't ask to be lighted. The house exhaled. For 2 hours. Then the tools disappeared. Not all of them, just the 3 things I needed for the pump that day: the wrench, the rubber seal, the short screwdriver that never strips. They weren't lost. They were intentionally elsewhere. I found the wrench in the chicken coop under a nesting hen who refused to move. I found the seal tied to the end of a curtain. I found the screwdriver standing upright in the dirt, balanced as if the world had decided to be kind to its center of gravity. I laughed. Out loud. Alone. And the wind stood up. A redemoinho swelled in the kitchen doorway and wouldn't cross the sieve. It leaned against invisible rules and breathed. Dust skittered around the edges like mice that preferred circles. From inside the turning, something hopped once and the entire spiral jerked with it. I saw, for half a heartbeat, the curve of a cap, not bright like paint, but red the way a coal is red, a promise of heat inside a dark. "Don't be rude," Donna Lourdes said to me in a voice meant for the wind. "Say what you want." "I want my tools where I left them," I said. "And the mare's mane free. And the flame to stay with the wood and not in the lamp." The spiral laughed. "You hear laughter. This one you stand in." My teeth felt tapped one by fingers that weren't there. The spiral leaned until it touched the sieve and stopped moving. Silence is loud when it's being held. Then a tiny voice slipped through the holes, counting fast like a game you're trying to win without showing your hurry. 1 2 3 4 5 6. The pump started in the yard. By sunset, we had our tools back where they had always been and never had been. I tied the mare's hair into one big sensible braid the way working people do so the wind minds its business. We ate quiet rice. Then the radio turned on to a station that doesn't exist in our state, a whistle station, a single polite note and then a small boy's laugh and then the same polite note again. I unplugged the radio. It kept playing until it forgot to. When I went to the yard to pee under the jacaranda, the dust devil was waiting by the post like someone who wants to walk you home without admitting they care. It hopped once, childish, joyful, and knocked my hat off with the sheer behavior of air. "I'll give it back," I said. "But we have to end it tonight." The dust devil understood. "Don't tell me wind can't tilt its head." I had an old bottle I'd sand etched a cross onto after my cousin's cow rolled an eye at something none of us could see. I had a cork that squeaked like a no when you pushed it. I had tobacco and the sieve and, in my pocket, the red thread that didn't want to be a thread anymore. "Don't steal his cap," my grandmother said from her bedroom, not loudly and not all the way awake. "It makes promises louder than you can keep." I'm not stealing, I said. I'm trading. I set the sieve in the doorway. I set the bottle next to it with the cork tilted like a ready lid. I sprinkled tobacco on the threshold in a line with room in it, the way you leave a path for an ant you don't intend to kill. Then I laid the red thread on top so the wind would know which color this bargain belonged to. The wind came as itself at first, honest air. Then it stood up and walked the way a shadow walks when it decides not to care if you notice. It stopped at the tobacco, tasted, made a little satisfied noise, and hopped. The sieve sang with counting. I didn't hear numbers, I felt insistence. My skin counted. My scalp counted. I waited for the moment I'd been told about but never believed in, the one beat where he loses the thread of his own arithmetic and looks up. When it came, so small you only know it by the absence of want, I lifted the bottle, swallowed the small spiral like you swallow a moth by accident, and drove the cork home. The bottle hummed. It didn't shake. It just insisted on being not empty in a way that made the table richer wherever it sat. The pipe smell burned sweet as if sugar were remembering being cane. I'm not cruel, I said to glass. But I'm tired. A laugh like the inside of a bell. Then a boy's voice that wasn't a boy's, scratched like dry leaves and young like rain. Give me your wish, farmer's grandchild. You know the law of caps and bottles. But if you ask wrong, I will keep the wish and the asking. I don't want a wish, I said. I want a trade. We'll close our gates and quit whistling and stop talking like we own places we only sleep in. You stop braiding the mare and give back what you took and leave the stove flame where it belongs. And you take this red thread with you. It's not mine. The bottle thought. You'll tell me bottles don't think. This one did. It felt like the world holding its breath and then remembering who it was. A prank for a promise, the bottle said. You swear not to whistle, and I swear not to visit unless invited. But I ask for one prank I get to choose, and no one gets hurt. Nothing that breaks or bleeds, I said. No animals punished. No blood, the bottle agreed. Only laughter that hurts pride and heals after. I uncorked it. The wind didn't rush out, it unfolded, as if it had been politely sitting and now stood to leave your table clean. A single red hair, or thread, or flame, spun in the air and landed on the tobacco, curling there like a sleeping comma. What prank? I asked. You'll see, it said, and the chair we keep by the door pulled itself backward the way a chair does when a friend stands and pretends it was always a little farther from the table. I heard the radio click on without electricity and waited for the whistle, but it didn't come. Instead, a voice that sounded almost like mine said my name from outside the window. When I looked, my hat was back on the post, with a braid tied around it. The braid had my red thread in it again, which made no sense except to the person who had taught me this game. In the morning, we found the prank. Our neighbor's rooster, a mean prince of feathers who ruled the yard with violence, wore a tiny red cap made from a piece of cloth that looked a lot like the lining of my Sunday jacket. The rooster strutted like a king whose crown actually fit. He didn't attack anyone all day. He just preened and allowed the hens to have their opinions. Donna Lourdes laughed so hard she had to sit down. My grandmother smiled into her coffee. I spent 4 hours sewing new lining into my jacket with thread that was not red. The mare let me comb her without the jerk of insult she kept for people who pretended not to see what she saw. That night, the key hung straight. The flame stayed in the wood. The radio was a radio again. I put the sieve by the door anyway and set a pinch of tobacco on a saucer because bargains have remainders. You owe interest to peace like you owe it to debt. A week later, my cousin came to help and brought beer and songs and a city habit that doesn't fear open land. He whistled at a star. The yard bent around us. It didn't twist like a storm, it rearranged itself like a person who doesn't like how the chairs are placed. My cousin's song collapsed into a cough. The air filled with pipe smoke that tasted like a story you weren't invited to. I put the sieve down. I didn't reach for the bottle. I only said, "We forgot." The wind laughed in a way that didn't bruise. It braided my cousin's shoelaces together so neatly he couldn't walk without falling. It lifted his hat and tucked it under the pump handle. It turned our salt jar exactly upside down and set it down again with all the salt still inside. A gentle humiliation, clean as a child's joke told perfectly. "I'm sorry," my cousin said to the air, which is the right person to apologize to when you stepped on the wrong throat. He untied his laces and didn't whistle again. The rooster still wore his little red crown for 3 days, then woke up without it, offended at his own head as if it had lost something it couldn't name. He went back to being almost awful. Which is another way of saying normal. If you ever go where the fence is more suggestion than border, remember the rule's older than your laugh. Don't whistle after dark. If a latch clicks on its own, you are not alone, be polite. Put a sieve by the door, it teaches patience to the impatient. If the milk sours without cause, don't blame the cow. Trade with tobacco, not with anger. Never steal a red cap unless you want to spend your next year explaining yourself to every wind. And if you must trap the whirlwind, bargain clean, no blood, no breaking, only laughter that heals pride after it stings. I still keep a sieve by my door. Sometimes, late, I hear a counting that sounds like rain teaching a roof how to be a drum. When it stops, I say thank you out loud and don't whistle. I sleep like someone who has neighbors, not threats, not friends, but neighbors, and that's enough. My grandmother always said the forest keeps boyhood as a tool. Saci is that tool. And some nights, when the radio skips to a note that has no station, the yard smells like burnt sugar, and I find a single red thread where it shouldn't be, I put it on the shelf and refuse to laugh, not because I'm afraid, but because I'm still a guest here. If this already gave you chills, hit like. It helps this story reach more people.